Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you have your coffee. We are in episode 2 of Heart of the Case on Social Work Scrapbook. In today's episode, I really want to break down something that I think scares a lot of people out of the field of social work in general, and that is the fact that in your day-to-day life, what we see on the regular is very impactful. It deeply impacts how we maneuver in the world as people, but also as parents. I am a boy mom, and in our last episode, so this episode is a little bit of a break. I like to call them a heartbreak. In every other episode, I will be here breaking down a true crime case, and then in the other episodes in between, we'll talk more matter of fact on how these cases and the cases that we see day to day as social workers truly impact how we are in the world and how to best take care of ourselves. And then I really want to dive into, and this is really like the meat of everything, 4 things that we can do as parents, as caregivers, as neighbors, as mentors, as tias and tios for the children that we're connected with personally in our lives, right? Our family members. 4 tips for building emotional resilience, but also not overprotecting them. The last thing we want is to send them out into a world that we know is flawed. The systems in it, many times the people that exist in those systems, we don't want them to be naive to that. We want them to be empowered. We want them to be resilient, to be able to overcome, not to think the world is sunshine and rainbows. So as much as you want to make the world super sunny and happy for them, it's super important to make sure they're also living life to its fullest and not afraid and not depending on you for every single thing. That's not what we want, right? So I'll talk about my 4 best tips for doing that. I have a 14-year-old and a soon-to-be 10-year-old. And I have to say, if you are parenting a younger child, that's the toughest time. Those elementary years are pretty tough. Yes, they're cute, but it is so tough. My bread and butter is more the teenage years. I really love those years, and I'm just getting into them as a parent. As a social worker, that is my population of choice, is teenagers, adolescents. I love the change. I love the attitude. I love the transparency. And it hits a little different when all that is coming from our own kids. I may be calling my bluff in a few more years or so, but for now, I really love the teenage years. So if that's what you're struggling with, then let's struggle together. Okay, let me jump into it. As far as our social work lessons, when you're in the trenches dealing with abuse, neglect, family crisis, we broke down in previous episodes the Case of Gabriel. It will be a case that always stays on my mind because it's the worst of the worst. I even shared in that episode how, as a parent, I myself get triggered when I would see my kids playing hide and seek. One gets into a cabinet, and that just triggered me as a parent. I just was like, no, get out of the cabinet. Almost, a little wild, like I had that little wild in my eye that my kids they're very good at this too, because we have such open communication. They call me out and say, Mom, what is going on, right? Reflect on your own behavior here. And I'm glad that they do that. They do that even more for me as I get older, and they really kind of force me to pause and keep me grounded for sure. And that's the beauty of kids, is they're so in the moment. And sometimes we as parents have to really slow down, because those evils, those situations that we have come into contact with, either by hearing the news stories or dealing with it in our day-to-day cases that we have to deal with, if you're a social worker, we have to be kind of brought down to life, because sometimes a cabinet is just a great hiding spot. It's not a form of neglect or abuse. And if you listen to that episode, if you've seen the Netflix documentary, you may know what I'm talking about. That's kind of my little story, and kind of sharing how things bleed over from what we see and deal with to our daily lives, and how we need to truly take a step back because I think the empath and social worker in me just didn't want to see that, didn't want to deal with it, and wanted to pull my kids out of the cabinet and explain to them how some kids are forced into cabinets and it's against their will. Too much, right? Just too much. That's more on me. That's my work that I need to do. If you have a child that's younger and that's not able to kind of slow you down and tell you, hey, you're not making sense right now, like you are taking this far and beyond what it needs to be. My spouse will do this as well. And my husband oftentimes will say, you are overthinking this. He will show me different TikToks or reels or shorts, and oftentimes we see this. They involve kids, and my mind just cannot stop overanalyzing. Like, this is not a joke. Why are they joking with the kid that way? Is this kid okay? I really can't turn it off. And so my family definitely helps me to put that little disconnect into motion so that I can, again, ground and pull myself back, because I don't want to be that overprotective parent. At the same time, I know that my lens is very valuable, and that steps me into the next little segment I wanted to talk about is our social work lens. Or if you're just an empath or an overprotective parent in general, let's say you're not a social worker and you're just tuning in and you may be thinking of social work. I'm not sure how you may have landed here, but welcome. We can become overprotective. We can be triggered very easily. We can see the worst in everything. But at the same time, just as there is cons, there are pros to that lens, to that overprotective lens that many of us might have just inherently had or maybe developed over our own childhood, our overprotective childhood. Love my mom dearly, but she was definitely a mommy that fawned over me, and I've had to kind of break free of some of my own fears because I know she just wanted me to be safe, but I didn't get very many street smarts. Those are things I've had to learn in the field. But this overprotective lens truly has its pros and its benefits because it allows us to advocate, right? For those that may not have seen the signs of distress, that may not have seen the red flags that we hone in on, they lose that opportunity to advocate for their kids. Advocacy is an area that social workers are like, it is drilled into you. We advocate for children. And what that means, it's we're trained to fiercely really use our instinct, our assessment skills to figure out what an issue is and learn how to defend someone that may not be able to protect themselves in that state. A lot of times this has to do with children. Working in schools, I have a really good sense of what the climate of a school is, what the rights of students and children are within schools, the rights of parents are within schools, and I've used that so many times to advocate for my own kids. I allow them to work on the situation as much as they can themselves because I don't want to enable them, and I'll share later on in this episode just how I do that in my 4 tangible tips to wrap up. But I do not wish to enable, so I do ask them to do as much as they can. But both my kids know that once they hit that limit of not knowing what to do or checking all their boxes and then still not seeing results, they know that they can reach out to me then, and the steps that I'm going to take, right, which is still lines of hierarchy. Be it a school situation, I'm going to speak to the teacher first, give the teacher an opportunity, right, schedule a parent-teacher conference. I'm going to then maybe rope in the school counselor or school social worker and then administration if need be to get down to a solution for what may be happening in the classroom or outside the classroom, whatever it may be. I share this because I've gone into schools maybe about once every other school year. I don't have to go too often because I really love the schools and the district that my children are in, and I respect it. And I know a lot of times if they are in trouble, I can't rescue, and that's happened as well, because then I just teach them that the rules don't apply to them, and I sure as heck don't want to be raising kids that are entitled, because kids that are entitled or enabled grow up to be not necessarily narcissistic, but they grow up to share and to show the characteristics of narcissism, right? Thinking the world revolves around them, or thinking everything revolves around them, when it really doesn't. Let's get into just the nuts and bolts, the 4 tangible things you can do as a parent to kids, protecting them but not overprotecting them. And the first one is truly modeling your own emotional regulation. Easier said than done, right? Emotional regulation meaning if you're frustrated or upset, you are not flying off the rails. If I spill my coffee, and this is a story that did happen, coffee break here, I was warming up my coffee in the microwave, which is an overhead microwave. And sadly enough, 5 minutes till we had to leave, I reached for my coffee, and it's like on one of those little spinning turntables on the microwave, and for whatever reason I'm in a rush. That's the reason, to be honest, is I'm running late per usual. So I'm like yelling out to my kids, 5 more minutes. Just as I'm doing that, the coffee just spills all over the kitchen floor, partly over myself. There's no time to change. It is what it is. My emotional regulation was not the best. I screamed, I shut down, I got very, very frustrated, right? To say the least. The better thing to do as I say, not as I did, was to say, I need a moment to calm down before I decide what to do right now. And removing myself from the situation instead of having this whole big explosion in the kitchen in front of both of my kids. It happens. And the lovely thing about parenting, and this is kind of a hack that I think a lot of parents overlook, is that we truly can apologize. We can, and it's okay, because I did apologize this morning, and that was my way of modeling healthy emotional regulation. Took me some time to ground myself. I did have to put 528 hertz music on the way to work. I had to force myself to do that because being in this angsty mood when I didn't have my coffee and I'm already running late, I just wanted to sit in silence, to be honest, but I knew that wasn't going to be effective at that time. And I could feel little eyes on me, just kind of like, is she okay? Is she okay? And I don't like that feeling. So I put on my grounding music. That's what 528 hertz is. It's a grounding type of music. Not even music, it's just like vibrations in a sense. And my kids know when I put that on that I'm grounding myself, like I am deliberately grounding. And after just a few deep breaths, I did turn to my most emotional little one, and I tell him, because my other one has the headphones in, he's grounding on his own, right? He's dealt with this longer. But to my youngest, and I tell him, hey, I'm really sorry for how I reacted back there. A, B, and C happened, but it still wasn't right. I still didn't need to yell. I could have taken a breath, and that would have been better for me, but I didn't, and I'm sorry that you had to see that. I want you to know that I am not angry or mad, or we're not late because of you or your brother. It's because I woke up late and I need to do better, and I know exactly what I'm going to do in the coming mornings to do better. So we have that talk. He's able then to ask his questions and to just check in on me and things like that, because I'm raising empaths. They are empathic themselves. And so apologizing really modeled that healthy emotional regulation. But I go back to say that modeling, it's even better if it's in the moment, like taking a deep breath when we're feeling frustrated, anxious, and showing them how that looks is leaps and bounds. That truly shows our kids that they can handle emotions, big emotions, small emotions. And that gets me into my second point, right? And that's just basically teaching those emotions, naming them, and expressing those emotions. Sometimes it's easier just to shut down, sit in silence, and not want to talk about it, or to hide those emotions from our kids. But it's so important. Everyone's going to do it their own way, and I think I could benefit more from hiding some of my emotions, but I do want my kids to build emotional intelligence. If we see someone going off the rails in road rage, wherever, we use that as examples to name the emotions. Wow, he must be really frustrated. Possibly he's running late. This has nothing to do with us because I don't want them owning any of that, right? If a boss, if a principal, if a teacher is upset or yelling at the class, my kids know that's the look of frustration. That has nothing to do with me necessarily, but possibly the time of the year. It's testing month, or the fact that the class is not listening as a whole, that they are being disrespectful, that everyone's coming in late today. They're aware of that, and teaching them safe ways to express those feelings, teaching them that the feelings, everyone has them, and it's okay to have them, and there's safe ways of expressing them and non-safe or non-productive ways of expressing them, and we can choose to do both depending on how we feel or what the situation is. But that, just teaching them the names, the expressions, the emotions, and why they come about is so important to not overprotecting our kids, because we want them to be around a lot of different emotions. There's been plenty of times that I've wanted to protect my kids from certain like super strict teachers or super strict administrators, but I can't do that. I have to let them experience that personality type so that they can understand and know how to work with that kind of personality. I have chosen not to place my kids in a charter school or private school, things like that, because I don't want to protect them from the day-to-day realities and the different personalities of people that are living through so many different scenarios that we may not be aware of. Things from poverty to anger to domestic violence to everything. Like, I don't want to shelter them from any of that. I need them to be exposed to everything that this world has to offer so that they know how to navigate it to the best of their ability. And I'd rather them know how to navigate it within my home and my parenting, so that, I feel like sometimes when kids are sheltered, they don't know how to navigate someone's anger or someone's anxiety or even lack of anything. Like, I want them to be exposed to situations that are out of even their experiences, so that they know not everyone might have what I have, and that's okay. That doesn't make them any less. Humans are resilient in general, right? We have the will to survive, and I want them to know that and not look down on anybody else, if that makes sense. 2 more tips that I have, and the other is encouraging them to problem solve. As I mentioned earlier, I really encourage my kids to try to figure it out for themselves as much as possible, right? And they know those steps, right? If they can deal with it person to person, right? Student to student, kid to kid, that's going to be better than having to loop in the teacher every time, because we know that if you're calling on the teacher or talking to the teacher, a teacher will call out a kid and say, stop being a tattletale, right? That's part of social skills building that happens, because we really don't want kids to get into that habit of telling every single time. That's a fine balance, because if you see something, say something, but at the same time, we want to teach our kids how to handle it and not just have to reach for someone every single time. We don't want to disempower them. We want them to know how to solve their own issues. And this starts, if you have younger kids, this starts really from the beginning, right? It's easier and faster for us, let's say, to tie our kid's shoe and then get out the door. But that doesn't teach them that they're able to do it themselves. That doesn't empower them at all. It actually makes them feel a little helpless. They're not going to say this to you in the moment, because kids are very smart. And if my mom's going to tie my shoe or my dad's going to tie my shoe, I'm going to let them. And for us, it makes it easier and we're out the door. But really stop and think about what habits you're creating. You're creating the habit of them really not being able to tie their shoe when they're going to need to do it for the rest of their lives, or on a morning that you're going to be unable to get to that shoe for whatever reason. You're tying your own shoes. and now they're going to have to do their own, and you don't want them to learn under a pressure like that. Or let's say you're sick, you're in the hospital, something like that happens, and now all of a sudden they have to tie their shoe. You don't want to have to be explaining to your sister, the neighbor, whoever's helping out, that they don't know how to tie their shoes. Not only because that would be like, really, I know my friends and family would call me out, like, why do they not know how to tie their own shoe? And if you have a good set of friends and family, they will call you out. And I don't want to hear that. So I know I need to teach them to do that, so that if they ever have to do it on their own, I'm not there for the morning routine, they know how to do it. And they're not going to rely or be embarrassed to ask somebody else. And this is just a small example, right? But you can take this to anything. It's not just tying your shoe. It's being able to do their own laundry as they get older, being able to order their own food. And I'm speaking to myself more than anything, because as our kids get older into those teenage years, they're going to ask for less and less. Ideally, they're going to ask you to do less and less because they're building those skills. So there is this kind of like, whenever they ask for help, there's like this little heart tug that happens where you just want to jump in and go into mommy mode. I know it sounds weird. If you're parenting younger kids, it's like, no, I'm done tying shoes. I'm done making breakfast. I'm done, right? Because you're being pulled in so many different directions. But trust me, it will stop. And then you're kind of like, when am I going to feel needed? I think that's just a common emotion, right? If we want to feel helpful, we want to feel needed as parents, but as our kids get older, ideally, they're reaching out for us less. So for me, I really have to temper back and not jump in too far, because if they ask me for anything, I'm like, I'm there. I need to really listen to my own advice on this one. And then my last thing is to really celebrate their effort, not just the outcomes. Focusing on effort and progress, not just results, is so key. It's so key. It's important to do that, not only for our kids, but honestly for everyone that we interact with, our spouses included, right? When my kids are trying something new, like a sport or an AP class, right? Advanced placement class, a GT class, I want to make a point to really praise their hard work. Really praise the fact that they even took a chance, and maybe they didn't pass with the highest score, or like it wasn't a winning season in this particular sport that they tried, but they tried it, right? That's what we're focusing in on, because it's not always about win, it's about the journey. And the earlier on that we can point that out to our kids, the more it's going to make sense to them as they grow up. Because I know we may hear those very hallmark things, it's about the journey, not the destination. If you're rolling your eyes just hearing that, it means we didn't hear that enough as kids. Throughout our own childhood, there was a focus on win. I come from a generation, I'll call myself out, where there were participation awards. I see what they're doing. The participation is the journey, the experiences that we had, the friendships that we made, the fact that we tried something new, we stepped out of our comfort zone. That participation piece is a reward in its own self. We didn't need the little medal to go around our necks to show that we did something. I do feel like we did a little more harm than good in putting rewards out there, because it puts the importance on the ending of something when it truly is just the journey. So we really need to help our kids see that challenges are opportunities to grow in general. Yes, you may have won, and that's the icing on the cake, but truly they took the opportunity to grow, and that challenges are not threats. They're not things that we need to avoid. They're really things we need to step into to be able to become our best selves. I want to wrap up with this. Truly, truly trust your instincts. You know your child better than anyone else, and there will be times when you feel pulled between protecting them and letting them go, and that's okay. That's the beauty of parenthood. Listen to your gut. Seek balance, and remember that love and fear are not the same thing. You're giving your child the gift of security, love, and space to become their best selves, and that's something truly incredible. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this episode helpful, share it with another parent who might need a little encouragement. We all do. And as always, I'd love to hear your stories, how you balance fierce love with giving your kids independence. Until next time, stay compassionate, stay curious, and keep loving fiercely, but with trust and confidence, not fear. Take care. We'll see you next week.